Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. As we continue to wait for the release of the Beach Boys' big Feel Flows box set, I thought now might be a fun time to talk about some of the Beach Boy projects of the early 70s that share a similar aesthetic to some of those early 70s Beach Boy albums. Specifically, I'm talking about a couple of albums that the Beach Boys worked with Charles Lloyd. Charles Lloyd, of course, is a famous flautist and saxophone player. He has a long and distinguished career in jazz. He worked with a veritable who's who of late 50s and early 60s jazz greats. In 1960, he became the musical director for Chico Hamilton's band. In 1964, he went to Cannonball Adderley's group. And in 1965, he formed the Charles Lloyd Quartet. As a Charles Lloyd Quartet, he released a number of acclaimed albums such as Dreamweaver in 1966, Charles Lloyd in Europe, also 1966, Love-In in 1967, and his biggest, Forest Flower, Charles Lloyd at Monterey in 1968, which became one of the first million-selling jazz albums. Charles Lloyd's music was notable for drawing influences from different genres, particularly rock music, and also from different parts of the world, something we would today call world music. By the late 60s, with all of his success, he was living the life of a rock star, hobnobbing with celebrities and sharing their indulgences, something that he apparently soon realized was not really working for him. As he later said, "I got off the bus in '69. I just realized the so-called fame or whatever came upon me as a young man. I wasn't prepared for it. I began to medicate myself because too much was coming at me in my mid-20s there." So, toward the end of the decade, with his career still going strong, Charles Lloyd withdrew from the public eye. He moved first to Malibu and later to Big Sur, where he reportedly lived in near seclusion. He chose to focus on what he described as an inner spiritual journey and to practice transcendental meditation. He didn't really return to his jazz career until 1981, when he was able to pick up with considerable success over the next several decades. He didn't stop making music, however. During the 70s, he seems to have averaged about one album per year, though the releases may have been more low-key than what he was doing in the 1960s, and he rarely made public appearances. He refers to this period as his Exile. He did also make some guest appearances on notable rock albums, such as the Doors' post-Jim Morrison album Full Circle, where he played tenor sax on the track Vertilac and flute on the track The Piano Bird. He's also credited on two tracks on Roger McGuinn's 1973 self-titled album, playing saxophone on My New Woman and Dragon. It was during the early 70s that Mike Lloyd came in contact with the Beach Boys. Now, I'm not sure how he exactly met any members of the Beach Boys, but as a musician and TM enthusiast living in Malibu and Big Sur, it's not surprising that he met Mike or Alan or both of them. He became a member of the Beach Boys touring band and played on several of their albums, including playing flute and saxophone on Feel Flows from Surf's Up. His flute can be heard prominently on California Saga, The Beaks of Eagles in California from Holland. He contributed flute to Everyone's in Love with You from 15 Big Ones, and is one of 8 people credited with horns on the MIU album. Pretty clearly, Mike Love is the Beach Boy that Charles Lloyd is closest with. He was part of Mike Love's late 70s side group, Celebration, there's Charles Lloyd, which Mike said he formed because he wanted to work with musicians who preferred meditation to drugs, a description which was certainly apt for Charles Lloyd. Various Beach Boy members, particularly Mike, contributed to 2 of Charles Lloyd's early 70s albums. The first of those was Warm Waters, which was released on the Cap Records label on May 24, 1971, about 3 months before the Surf's Up album. Charles Lloyd had sung on albums prior to this, but I believe this is the first, and I think the only album where he sings lead on every track. His voice is not great. It's slightly flat, got a bit of a monotone, which probably makes it sound worse than it really is. It sounds very much like a softer version of Dennis in places, with some inflections that remind me of Randy Newman. The singing is okay, but certainly nobody was going to advise Charles Lloyd to stop playing flute and become a full-time vocalist. The tracks featuring the Beach Boys are mainly acoustic. Other tracks are more electric, with an occasional early 70s electric rock guitar freakout. It's got a much more pop rock feel to it than a jazz feel. I'd call it a pop rock album with some jazz overtones. The album originally came with a hype sticker that just had Charles Lloyd and the album title Warm Waters on it, since the album and artist name didn't actually appear on the album cover. On German copies of the album, at least, there seems to have been a listing of the special guest stars, all of whom had rock backgrounds, that were featured on the album. Members of the Beach Boys are credited on the first 2 tracks on the album, the first of which is called All Life Is One. It features Mike, Alan, Carl, and Brian on backing vocals, and Carl on Moog synthesizer. Additional backing vocalists include Cowsill's lead guitarist and vocalist Billy Cowsill, Retta Hughes, and Mike O'Gara. Dave Mason, formerly of Traffic, is on 12-string guitar on that track, and John Cipollina of Quicksilver Messenger Service provides slide guitar. The track is largely acoustic with Indian-sounding guitar and flute flourishes. On this particular track, Charles Lloyd's vocal reminds me in places a little bit of Jack Riley's vocal on The Day in the Life of a Tree on Surf's Up. Again, that might be making it sound worse than it is. I think thematically it's kind of similar, so maybe that's where I'm seeing the connection. The background vocals are most prominent on a sort of Hey Jude-like coda at the end. It's not nearly as long as the coda on Hey Jude, but it's kind of a similar feel to it. At various points you can clearly hear Mike and Carl among the vocalists, but mainly it's an ensemble vocal, with the most prominent vocal being the high vocal by Retta Hughes. It's not a particularly Beach Boy-esque vocal arrangement, but overall it does share some stylistic similarities to tracks on Surf's Up. The second track on the album is called How Sweet, and Mike Love is credited on the record label as the sole author. Now, other places I've seen it credited to Mike Love and Charles Lloyd, but on the album itself, Mike Love is credited as the sole writer. This track also features Dave Mason and John Cipollina again, along with Retta Hughes. And you can clearly hear Retta Hughes singing along with Charles Lloyd's lead vocal higher than Charles Lloyd, and you can hear Mike Love singing along lower than Charles Lloyd. And the end features a short spoken recitation by Mike Love. Again, it's a slow, sort of acoustic number, much like the prior track, All Life Is One. The third track is a little more showbizy, kind of rock and roll. It's called Memphis Belle, and while none of the Beach Boys are credited on it, I swear you can hear Mike doing a short recitation at the end that begins with, "Needless to say, she never returned." Not sure whether that's Mike Love or not. If anybody has any insight into that, I would love to hear about it. Overall, Warm Waters is a pleasant, if unmemorable, early 70s album with some fusion of genres and styles that occasionally shine. Charles Lloyd's flute playing throughout is, of course, beautiful. The next Charles Lloyd album touted its Beach Boy connection on its hype sticker, which reads, TM features the voices of Beach Boys, Mike Love, Carl Wilson, and Al Jardine. The album, Waves, was released on A&M Records on October 20th, 1972, about 5 months after the Carl and the Passions album. This is a much more straight-ahead jazz fusion album. It features mostly long instrumental pieces with the kind of Asian, Latin, Caribbean, Middle Eastern influences that Charles Lloyd's work was long known for. It's definitely the stronger of the two albums, and I love the cover. I love the colors, I love this line drawing, I love the back cover, which features a version of Hokusai's The Great Wave off Kanagawa on the back cover. The inner sleeve features a photo on which the outer sleeve is based, and some credits. And original pressings of this is a little hard to find, have this sort of tissue paper insert here that has the same credits that appear on the inner cover. Without this, you have no track listing and no credits on the outer cover. That's a little bit difficult to find. The album kicks off with the track TM, which of course features vocals by Mike, Alan, and Carl. Billy Hinchy and singer-songwriter Pamela Polland are also on backing vocals. Roger McGuinn contributes 12-string guitar, and Hungarian jazz legend Gabor Szabo contributes guitar as well. This is easily my favorite of the tracks that we're going to discuss here. It's an acoustic track that showcases a beautiful vocal arrangement. It's the kind of transcendental doo-wop that the Beach Boys touched on with things like All This Is That. I also think Sweet Mountain from the Spring album has a little bit of that feel. And here it is again on TM. It's just gorgeous. It's the kind of thing I wish the Beach Boys themselves had pursued much further. You could say that the vocal refrain here, TM in the AM and the PM, is not a brilliant lyric, but it's got a simple chant-like quality to it that is absolutely appropriate for a song about meditation. If you don't know this song and you like Carl and the Passions, you really should know TM from Charles Lloyd's Waves. There's another track that features Mike Love on side 2. The track is called Rishikesh, and it's credited as having been written by Charles Lloyd and Mike Love. It's part 2 of a 3-part song cycle similar to the California Saga on the Holland album. Mike is featured doing a spoken word piece that lasts 1 minute 24 seconds, backed by flute, acoustic guitar, and percussion, and ends with the sounds of birds. It's a very nice ethereal track. It's bound to remind Beach Boy fans of the Beaks of Eagles section of California Saga from the Holland album. All in all, this is a pretty strong album on its own. Features some very nice contributions from the Beach Boys that sound like 1972 Beach Boys work. It's really worth tracking down. Neither of these albums is particularly difficult to find. It is a little bit harder to find this tissue paper insert with the Waves album, and based on the way the colors are on the Warm Waters album, it's pretty difficult to find it without a lot of ring wear from being in bins, and it's just got, you know, that sort of ring around the top. Unfortunately, finding one with a nice cover is a little bit difficult. But they are around. It's definitely worth checking them out if you like this period of the Beach Boys, particularly the track TM from the Waves album. Hope you've enjoyed this. Please comment. If anybody knows how Charles Lloyd ended up meeting Mike Love and the Beach Boys, I'd love to get that mystery solved. Anything else you'd like to contribute about Charles Lloyd, anything I missed, I would love to hear from you. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you found this interesting. Maybe we'll get to talk about Feel Flows pretty soon. I certainly hope so. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.